Welcome, everybody, to the Soul of the Unexplained. I am your host, Jim Kelgard. That's right, Jim, with two M's. Why? I don't know, because I'm kind of weird like that. And as always, I am joined by my awesome co host and co creator of this strange enigma that we call the Soul of the Unexplained, Mr. Roger Stokes. How are you doing, Roger?
Everyone, I am doing well. I hope all of you and our followers and those that will follow us in the future are all doing fine. We have a fantastic show today for you. And, you know, this is actually, a few years ago, I probably wouldn't have done a podcast like this around this topic, but it's become a lot more fascinating. And I think, Jim, we can kind of discuss that going into it. But stay tuned for all things because we are going to discuss Bigfoot today. That's
That's
right. Not that I have big feet or Jim has big feet. Maybe he does. I don't know. He's
Oh, I
Viking.
do. I
But
got
in any
big.
case, we actually are going to talk about Bigfoot. And more importantly, a documentary that both Jim and I we actually got to see after it was shortly or several years ago after it was made, and we viewed this at Phenomicon several years ago, and it's actually a really good documentary on not only what I would say the legend of Bigfoot, but actual experiencers of Bigfoot. And with that, Jim, kind of lead us on.
Alrighty, Roger, you're absolutely correct. Roger and I were fortunate enough back in 2022. You've heard Roger and I talk a lot about this thing called Phenomicon, and of course, for those of you that don't know, Phenomicon is this absolutely outstanding conference that is put on every September out in Vernal, Utah, northeastern Utah, and it deals with all kinds of topics of what some would call the paranormal. So there's plenty of talk about UFOs and UAPs, ghosts and hauntings, and of course Bigfoot, and one of our favorite topics as well, Skinwalker Ranch, and just kind of all things pertaining to the realm of the unexplained. And so the this phenomenon is entering into its fourth year here in 2024, and Roger and I are once again excited to attend this year. And so in 2022, Phenomicon started doing something called the Phenomicon Film Festival. Now, here in the great state of Utah, Roger, we have another very famous film festival that happens every January called the Sundance Film Festival,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah. I used to put that on. I was oh wait, no, no, just kidding.
Right.
Sundance is an amazing event. So if you guys, if anybody, if you live outside of the state of Utah and really want a fun experience, a busy one, lots of crowds, uh, come to see the Sundance Film Festival up at Park City. It won't disappoint. It'll be cold, but it's fun.
Oh yes, that is very true. So Utah is no stranger to film festivals, and so this idea of a Phenomicon Film Festival, Roger and I really weren't quite sure what to make of it at first. This, of course, again being the second year of Phenomicon 2022, and we found ourselves on, I think it was the second night, actually technically the first night of Phenomicon, because if you remember, they showed that first film, which was actually a great little kind of a tribute documentary that Russ Acord from the Expedition Bigfoot team had
Mhm.
done to honor his friend and legendary Bigfoot experiencer Bob Gimlin. And so that was the first night, and Roger and I were really impressed by this little film that Russ Acord had prepared as a tribute to Bob Gimlin. Well, the next night was the first official day of Phenomicon. And so in the evening of the first night of Phenomicon on 2022, they had another series of films that were shown at this Phenomicon Film Festival. And one of them was this documentary, which Roger and I are about to give you a full front to back review of. And it was a film called A Flash of Beauty Bigfoot Revealed. And folks, all that I can tell you is that when Roger and I first heard of this concept of the Phenomicon Film Festival, and that it was going to be these independent filmmakers, releasing documentaries and things like that. Uh, Roger and I are both pretty big film fanatics. We love to watch movies. We have, just like anybody, we have certain kinds of films, certain genres that we like to watch. And I have always been a big fan of documentaries. Couldn't tell you why. I'm one of these crazy guys that I like to read a lot, and so of course I also like to watch a really well produced documentary, regardless of what the subject is. And so we weren't really quite sure what to expect quality wise when it came to what these films were going to be like. And I know I can tell you from my experience, and Roger, you can tell me if you were any different, but when we caught, and to be fair, we only caught about the last 45, maybe 50 minutes of this Bigfoot Revealed documentary that we're going to talk about here in a few moments. But the small portion that we saw, not only was I blown away by the level of professionalism in the cinematography and the way that it was edited, the sound, I mean everything. And remember, folks, I'm a sound engineer and audio engineer by trade, so I'm really big on sound quality of things. And most of all, there was for want of a better word, a testimony given by a Bigfoot experiencer at the tail end of this documentary, a wonderful gentleman by the name of Daryl Wilson, who actually is a resident of Vernal, Utah. And in this documentary, and we will talk about this in depth in a short while as Roger and I start talking about the film in depth. But Roger, I was really, really moved, for want of a better word, from the testimony that I heard uh, in that little segment that Daryl Wilson recorded for this documentary. And I was literally, my expectations were blown out of the water, I guess is the best way that I can describe it for this particular documentary. And for me, that kind of set the standard of what every other film I would see at this Phenomicon Film Festival would would be held up against, was this particular documentary that we're about to review right now. So me personally, I was really pleasantly surprised, and not just by the quality of the films that were selected by the Phenomicon organizers to be debuted at this Phenomicon Film Festival, but specifically this film and what kind of impact it had on me. And so that's kind of what my assessment was. What were your thoughts when you saw it, Raj?
Yeah, after just watching it, I think, you know, back then I was probably a little more skeptical on Bigfoot. And, you know, as you as our subscribers know, and I've talked about in the past, so I'm very open to the paranormal. I've had paranormal experiences my whole life. Um, right? But that's even with that, some of these things out there, right? I try to take a skeptical look and make sure that I'm not looking at anything that is super crazy or super out there that can't be substantiated in some way. And so I'm open to any and all things. And this was actually something, like you said, Jim, I was pleasantly surprised. And, you know, it at that Phenomicon, Daryl Wilson was there, and he not only shared his experience, the same thing that he shared in this documentary, A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, but he was there at the Voice of the Believers microphone there for that event. And it was really great just talking with him and hearing his story again in his own words. And it's very similar to, and I'm gonna kind of mix genres here a little bit, but when we had the opportunity um, to talk to a few other people, and sorry, his name is escaping me, but no, sorry, Travis Walton. So if you're familiar with the UFO abduction by Travis Walton, the movie doesn't do it justice. But hearing it in his own words and speaking to him, shaking his hand, looking directly in his eye, right, you can tell that there's a conviction there. Again, right, and that's just my own personal opinion. But same thing with Daryl Wilson. his story, his experience as being an experiencer was authentic and genuine to me. Just listening it to, out of his own voice, right? He was telling people, telling us, and that is definitely different. And this kind of really opened my eyes to the fact that there are, just like we've tried to do with the Soul of the Unexplained, is reduce that stigma. People have Bigfoot experiences. And that's what this show really opened my eyes to, is that there are a lot of people out there who, one, are afraid of sharing information, but coming forward more and more now. And with this documentary, right, we're going to talk about all the different people that have come together to tell their collective stories and experiences around Bigfoot and some of the evidence that they have found supporting those claims. And so, for me, it was just kind of, again, that eye-opening experience, knowing that, once again, something that I had very little knowledge on. It was great learning about and actually talking to people that had those experiences, and I can't wait to talk a little bit more about what happens in this movie. And so, even before we get into this and talk about it, if you as our listener want to pause this podcast right now and watch it, it is called A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed. So from here on going forward, spoilers ahead. So if you don't want it to be spoiled and you want to watch it for yourself, definitely recommend it. You can purchase or rent it on Amazon Prime, is where I bought the actual movie and watch it and stream it over and over again. But that's my warning there. But I think you guys will be pleasantly surprised because there is also a follow-up movie, A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Paranormal, that they, at the end of this one, that they kind of tease. And so, with that, Jimm, that was my experience, and I'm really excited talking about this documentary now.
Fantastic. And my experience was not too dissimilar from yours, Roger. I've unlike you up until recently, as our viewers and followers know, I've not had very many paranormal experiences in my life. That all changed about a year ago in a very big way, which you can go back and find on one of our previous episodes. But I've always I've always held out the belief that these things are possible. It's just that I was never an experiencer myself, and I've talked at length a number of times, as have you, Roger, about what it's like making that transition from being a believer into being an experiencer. And it's really something that changes you on a very foundational, elemental level, if there is such a thing. That once you experience something, your whole entire view of that particular thing, whatever it may be, is forever altered. Your course
Right.
of thought, everything that you think and believe and know about it, because at that moment that you become an experiencer, you have knowledge. Okay. When you're just a believer, you just have you form these hypotheses, you rationalize it, say, well, it could be possible because this, and yes, it kind of meshes with my spiritual or religious upbringing, whatever the case may be, but you don't have necessarily knowledge, meaning you don't have that firsthand
First
experience.
hand experience, right?
But once you have that experience, once you have seen something and experienced it, whether by yourself or with a group of people, at that point you have knowledge and can no longer deny. Because once you have knowledge and then deny it, then what good are you? Honestly. I mean, I understand people can have fear about things. They can have fear of being ridiculed, fear, you know, stigma obviously still widely encompasses a lot of the topics that we cover with the soul of the unexplained. And I don't deny that. But once you experience something, once you see something or have that experience, nothing and no one can take that away from you.
Right.
And this film that we're about to dissect uh, has a lot of instances where we're hearing directly from firsthand experiencers, people that actually saw Sasquatch or Bigfoot or had some kind of interaction with this this creature. Now, also like you, Roger, I was not really I hadn't really formed an opinion one way or the other on Sasquatch or Bigfoot. Um, there's all these great cryptids that are legendary cryptids that we hear about, like the Loch Ness monster, the Yeti or the abominable snowman, um, and there's um, there's the lake monsters, Ogopogo and Champ up in Lake Champlain, back in my own home
Yep.
state of New York, might I add.
Right. There's the
Um,
Bear Lake monster up in Bear Lake here in Utah. Yeah.
right, exactly. Um, so there's no shortage of these classic stories, myths, and legends of these cryptids that just don't seem to fit in to what we accept as being a real, quote unquote, real thing. Uh, a lot of it is due to the fact that there's no hard scientific data that can be verified or quantified. And oftentimes, when there is pictures of these alleged creatures, they're kind of, it's not like there's never been a single smoking gun, if you will, picture for any of these alleged creatures that people say exist and say that they have seen, but there's no incontrovertible proof, I guess you could say, that any of these creatures have been determined to exist. And and let's get this out of the way right away. As much as I want to believe in the Loch Ness monster, I find that the less likely of all these creatures to possibly exist, simply because of what people say it looks like. It's supposed is it this great, you know, is it this reptile? I mean, how is a reptile going to survive in water that is that cold? Um, these are questions that my brain has.
Right.
Uh, but Sasquatch or Bigfoot is something that I've always kind of placed at the top of that list of, if any of these creatures are ever proven to be true and proven to actually exist, then Bigfoot was always at the top of that list, I guess I would say. And again, I've never seen one. Um, I have met people that have claimed to have seen them, but I myself have never had the privilege, I guess you would say.
Right. And
So
that, another one. So
yeah, yeah, I've but I always held out the possibility that, just maybe. And I'm not going to close the door completely, even on things like the Loch Ness monster, because we just don't know. There are so many other ways that something like that could be real, um, that I don't believe in closing the door completely on the possibility of any of them actually uh, being proven to exist at one point or another. So, but with Bigfoot, that was one that it's one of those cryptids that I can actually place a lot more stock in the fact of it actually having existed. So while I didn't really have a firm opinion one way or the other, uh, after having viewed documentaries like the one that we're about to talk about, and after watching several of the seasons of Expedition Bigfoot, having had a chance to meet and talk to Dr. Maria Mayor, Ronnie LeBlanc, and Russ Acord, and Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who is one of the professors of anthropology that is actually featured in this documentary. And we're fortunate in that Dr. Meldrum actually teaches at a university that's not even 2 hours away from where we live, Roger. So that's kind of cool. But so yeah, I think after the last the last 2 years, my opinion on Bigfoot has changed, and to the extent that I do believe that there is something to all the myths and the legends. A lot of what I'm hearing from some of the Native American legends and folklore seems to support uh, a lot of the experiences that I'm hearing about from people in the modern day. And Roger, let's not also discount the fact that you and I have actually seen the petroglyphs at McConkey Ranch,
I was going to
where
mention.
there is clearly depictions of what we would call a Sasquatch. So obviously, this isn't a creature that has just been a phenomena since 1967, which is when Patterson and Gimlin shot their famous footage of the creature that's now been called Patty. Um, so my mind is a lot more open. I'm still not going to say definitively yes, I believe that Sasquatch actually exists, but I'm certainly more leaning toward that direction, if that makes any sense. And this documentary that we're about to examine point by point has played a big role in opening my mind even more. And to me, that's a testament to the skill and the integrity of the filmmaker, of the director, and the folks that prepared this documentary, which we're about to talk about. So let's dive in, shall we? And I'm going to have to put on my four eyes here because I'm going to be reading a lot. So apologies, but Roger, we actually have a graphic of what the artwork of this particular documentary looks like. If you want to put that up on the screen for us here for just a quick moment.
Yes, if you can give me permissions to do that. It's letting me know that I don't.
No, I'm not going to give you permission.
No, don't do it, Jim.
I guess I should do that right there where it says share screen. Oops. Here we go. Oops. Yes, folks, Jim is a bit of a Luddite. I'm sorry.
We'll get this.
Okay.
Don't you
Alrighty.
worry. Ah, yes. Here we
There you
go.
go, Roger. I am granting you permission.
Yay. All right. So this is the Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed. This is the artwork uh, for the movie. I'm using a site here. Just I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but IMDb, which catalogs all the movies, stars, and everything. You can just look this up on there. IMDb.com. Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, and it'll tell you the director, everybody that's in there. But this was I don't know, Jim. I really like this poster cover or movie cover, if you will. Very intriguing. It does like like it shows there. It is a flash of beauty, right? You've got Bigfoot walking through the forest. You've got the sun coming in. So, um, yeah, it's a very, I think, intriguing and great way to draw in a viewer to come in and check out the movie.
Completely agree. Absolutely agree. So, the film again, just to kick off, it's directed by a gentleman by the name of Brett Eichenberger and produced by Jill Remensnyder. And Brett Eichenberger, again, this is the first in a series of films that he's done about Bigfoot. And the really cool thing about this Flash of Beauty Bigfoot Revealed is that it starts off with a quote, and I'll read that quote to you. It says, "The time will come when diligent research over long periods will bring to light things which now lie hidden." And that is accredited to Lucius Seneca, from the first century AD. Now, forgive me, I'm normally really well researched on my history, but I didn't get a chance to find out who exactly Lucius Seneca is. But that is actually a quote that I can relate to here regarding the topics that Roger and I cover with the paranormal, and specifically with the the soul of the unexplained. So one of the things that it then transitions into is there is a great quote from Dr. Jeff Meldrum. And again, Dr. Jeff Meldrum is a professor of anatomy and anthropology at Idaho State University in Pocatello, Idaho. And he says something here that really resonates with me. And Roger, I want to get your thoughts on it after I read this quote here. He says, "There are competing hypotheses about what Sasquatch is, what its nature is, and I've approached this subject from the perspective of an anthropologist, anatomist, and biologist. And so the evidence that impresses me that suggests the existence of this creature points to it being a large bipedal primate. It's particularly interesting to me due to my interest in the evolution of human bipedalism and sharing that habitat with another species of primate living alongside us is a unique and interesting opportunity of comparison and contrast to that adaptation. It's the footprint evidence that drew me in. So, Roger, there we have a quote from a very prominent, very well respected anthropologist and anatomist. So this is a gentleman who is a current professor at Idaho State University, and he is somebody that believes that there is something more than just simply legends and hooey and nonsense to this phenomena that we call Bigfoot or Sasquatch. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I really respect Dr. Meldrum. He did present at Phenomicon a couple times, and his presentation is really good because he is approaching it from, I guess, the anthropologist point of view, right? And just the physical evidence that he's been able to gather. Um, and what really I like about that quote that you read is just the feet, just what the creature's called Bigfoot, right? There he has collected a lot of different cast data, meaning that when they find these huge footprints um, that look a lot like human feet, except that they're extremely large. This would be a creature that definitely is bipedal, but is right 8 to 9 feet, anywhere like that, right? And so just for him stating that and actually having some of the casts that, he has shown not only to us, like at Phenomicon, but in this documentary, it is very, very intriguing to me that, um, right, that I think he prevents or presents the evidence in a way that it makes sense. And like I love that quote because it just I don't know, my own personal experience is that, it's these little discoveries that people make, right? And with his interest in it, this isn't just some, we have a lot of different stories that come through where hunters will be out there, right, and saying they saw something and, the footage you really can't tell. But coming from him and especially also Dr. Mayor on Expedition Bigfoot, the fact that they have found evidence. Um, right? We don't have a smoking gun evidence of like someone walks right up and is like, take a picture. But I think the behavior and the amount and the triangulation that he does of where this evidence is captured, especially these casts that he's making of the Bigfoot, right? And just all the different areas, and it shows that there are populations of supposed Bigfoot out there. Um, and if you guys ever get a chance to watch some of the previous Phenomicons, which I know you can order, or at least in the past you've been able to order it from Phenomicon itself. But his presentation is really, really good about how he goes about presenting that evidence and data. So for me, I think coming from a credentialed professor at a university that's coming out and saying, yes, I believe these things exist, and here's some of the evidence to support that, right? But a lot more data is still needed. And I think it's forgive the pun, but a step in the right direction.
Absolutely, well said. I think the fact that we have a well-respected, prominent academic like Dr. Meldrum, who is willing to take that risk, for want of a better word, and saying that yes, there is a lot of evidence to indicate that there may be this undocumented species, this uncatalogued species uh, that is clearly, showing trace evidence of its presence in the wilderness of all kinds of, certainly all over North America. It's not just in the Pacific Northwest, although that is where the highest
A lot.
concentration of sightings is.
Yeah.
But there are sightings in places like Pennsylvania and Ohio and Florida. You don't get much different as far as environment conditions as you do between the contrast between a state of like Florida versus Washington State. I mean, there's a big difference in the climate between those particular two locations. So, but that's one of the things that carries a lot of weight for me is when you have somebody like a Dr. Meldrum who says, well, let's look at the scientific evidence. And there is plenty of scientific evidence to say that it merits further investigation because there is this data that's gathered from footprints, and we've all seen the huge casts of the big feet, and there's also again the eyewitness testimony. So I always find it interesting, Roger, that in almost any other circumstance, now the naysayers will say that eyewitness testimony is, unreliable by nature. And I can agree with that up to an extent. But then why do we allow eyewitnesses at trials, criminal trials, and any other kind of trial? Um, how is it okay for, say, a murder trial or a rape trial or a grand theft trial, but eyewitness testimony just isn't good enough when somebody sees a UFO or a UAP or something else that's quote unquote not supposed to exist? So,
Right.
um, for me, the fact that we do have this academic like Dr. Meldrum providing his opinion, and he's looking at it from a very rational, very scientific approach, and he says, you know what, yeah, there's something to see here and it merits further investigation, and I don't think that can be overstated, the importance of that.
Yeah, and one thing on his actual bio at the university, so the Idaho State University faculty, so it's Dr. Jeffrey Meldum, PhD, but in his biographical sketch, it says his interest in the footprints attributed to Sasquatch was piqued when he examined a set of 15-inch tracks in Washington in 1996. Now his lab houses well over 300 footprint casts attributed to this mystery primate. So that right there, we have an accredited university in a biographical sketch, right, talking about this elusive creature, Bigfoot, and he's conducted a lot of his research and life around this mysterious creature we know as Bigfoot. And to me, that says a lot about his integrity right there, and about the integrity of Idaho State University and having that there. So again, I think this is Dr. Meldrum has done a great first step in establishing some credibility around whether it's the mythology, the people that experience it, that see it, that these things are actually out there. This could very likely, when you go camping in the woods somewhere in North America, you could run across this creature.
Absolutely, could not agree more. So the documentary mentions that for indigenous tribes in the Pacific Northwest of the United States, the Sasquatch it's part of their lore and it's part of their world. And as one of the researchers in the documentary actually says, is that when you listen to the legends of these indigenous people, these Native American tribes, they talk about the fox, the bear, and the Sasquatch, right? So this is a creature that has been part of their world, their existence, going back since time immemorial, basically. And I think that's another thing. And Roger, I know I sound like a broken record because I say this in regards to the research going on at Skinwalker Ranch and so many other things about how we should always consider the stories and the history of the culture of the indigenous tribes uh, in the world, not just in North America, because these are people who have observed these things for centuries, if not millennia. And far too often, so many people are quick to just simply discard these legends that the indigenous tribes and the First Nations, the traditions that they have, because to them it's all fairy tales and nonsense. And that is an extremely ignorant viewpoint, I think, to take. And you're literally cutting off your nose to spite your face to simply say, well, I'm gonna pay attention to the scientific data. And trust me, folks, that's obviously something that we should pay very close attention to. But I don't think that's necessarily the full picture. And because of that, I think we always need to have respect and take into account the stories, the history, the legends, the folklore, whatever you want to call it, the history of these Native American peoples, because they have been observers of these phenomena for far longer than we have. And that's just something that I feel very strongly about.
Yeah, I
So
100% agree.
and it goes on to say that Oregon, Washington, and California historically they're hotbeds of Sasquatch activity and or sightings, but also particularly here in the western United States, there are plenty of sightings in Utah, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. So pretty much all the major mountain states, the Intermountain West, the Rocky Mountains, the Wasatch Mountains, the Uinta Mountains, the Wind River Range up in Wyoming, and of course, you've got the Sierra Nevadas in California, the Mount Hood National Forest in Oregon, uh, Mount Rainier. I mean, there's so much wilderness that's out there, and I think a lot of people that have never traveled throughout the United States, and Roger, you can tell me if you agree with me on this or not, but I've had the privilege and the honor of being able to travel all over the United States. I think there's only maybe a dozen states that I've actually never been to, Hawaii and Alaska being two of them. But particularly in the western part of the United States, there is so much open space. And if you happen to live like, I mean, I grew up back east. I grew up in New York State. And I didn't grow up in New York City. I grew up in upstate New York, where it's a little more sparsely populated than it is in the New York City area. Okay, a lot less populated. But out in the West, once you get west of the Mississippi, sure, you've got big cities like Denver and Salt Lake City and Phoenix and Los Angeles and San Francisco, but there's an awful lot of wilderness that is out there. And one of the things that I thought was interesting is that there's actually a computer scientist and data analyst that's featured in the documentary. His name is Farouk Mohammed, and he says that less than 30% of North America has actually been walked by man. And what's in those areas of uninhabitable or intraversable environments, that to me is all the more alluring to find out what's in those areas, close quote. So think about that for a moment, folks. We know that North America has been pretty well mapped, at least from, satellite images. So it's definitely fair to say that the land in North America has been mapped fairly well. But think about that. Less than 30% of North America has actually been walked by man. I mean, that's kind of a how about you, Roger? Would you are you as equally impressed and kind of shocked to hear that?
Yeah, yeah, it's not, I think in our modern day, just because of the amount of travel and the technology that we have that has opened up the world to a lot of people, right? I don't think I've ever been in the mindset of like, even though like, yeah, man, I've been all over Utah, right? I've been all over the United States. I've been to a lot of places. I've hiked trails. But to really think about that, it is kind of mind blowing that you know, less than 30% has actually been, traversed by man. And there are a lot of remote locations that would be very, very difficult for, humans to get to. And it just reminds me of, let's say our oceans, right? We've
Right.
not explored our oceans. There are very, very deep places of the ocean that we know nothing about. And we're furthering that science, and we are, I can't remember, but I do remember a little bit that, they do find existence of life even, very, very deep when they've been able to go down and new species, things like that, things that have evolved, I suppose, over time to that harsh environment. So I definitely agree with that statement. I mean, it's interesting if we could get into these places, and make them, not that I would want people to go into these places because I want to preserve, the nature and things like that. But if there was a way to get in there without harming the environment and the things there, I do think we would find a lot of things that we may not really know about or think of, right? It's really mind-opening to know that there are still so many places on this earth that are unexplored by man.
Yeah, and it's really something to think about. I mean, we hear about how there's so much overpopulation in the world and how, we're running out of space. Um, that's kind of a ridiculous argument. I mean, there's so much open space, but again, then we run into the issue that you just mentioned, Roger, which is, do we preserve these areas of wilderness, or do we allow man to spread? Do we allow civilization, 21st century civilization, to spread into these unsettled, perhaps untrodden areas that this Farouk Muhammad is talking about? And that's a debate for another group of people, for another channel on another time. I don't want to get into that debate, but there is. I mean, when you really travel outside, if all you've ever done is grown up in a big metropolitan area and that's all you've ever known, you really, I don't think, grasp how big the United States is. Just the United States, to say nothing of Canada. Just how much open, unpopulated space and wilderness that there is out there, and that's a pretty humbling thought when you stop to think about it. So just had to. I thought that was interesting that he brought up that point that less than 30% of North America has actually been walked or explored by man.
Yeah, yeah.
So the documentary then jumps into this great uh, story of two gentlemen who are kind of like survival experts, and their names are Chad Granger and Austin Hauser. And in 2020, they were in the wilderness in Oregon filming a survival video to be put on their YouTube channel. And they saw what they initially thought was perhaps a mother bear and her cubs across the shore of this lake way in the backcountry that they were doing this in. And they very soon realized that they weren't bears, but rather they were looking at a Sasquatch and its children. And so this next little quote here is from Austin Hauser, and he says, quote, "The size was remarkable. I mean, larger than any human I've ever seen. As soon as you realize that it wasn't some kind of animal that you would normally see out here, it kind of just like took everything out of your body, just took your whole breath away, and everything just went silent." Close quote. And so here we have a moment of where somebody becomes an experiencer, where their reality, for want of a better term, is broken. Everything that they felt was, in the order of their universe, in the order of their world, was shattered in a heartbeat when he saw this Sasquatch and its presumably its children standing just a short distance away on the shoreline of this lake in this remote bit of the back country on the border between Oregon and California. And again, folks, just imagine what that must be like. And both Roger and I can tell you, being experiencers not of Bigfoot, but of other strange phenomena. And again, when you have that experience, your mind is trying to rationalize it away and say, well, no, no, it wasn't what I thought I saw. But then your eyes are like telling your brain, no, dummy, you are seeing this. This is really happening. And so there's that disconnect that happens between, your perception of what's real and what's not real. And they all just kind of get blended into one massive mass, I guess you would say, of, you're not really quite sure. Your brain doesn't know how to process it. And, I'm sure that if we had Austin Hauser here to talk to, he would probably relate something similar to what I'm explaining, because that's what I went through when I saw when I had my experience. It was over a year ago, and Roger, I'm still trying to put the pieces together. I'm still trying to figure out what it meant. I'm still trying to figure out how it's possible. Um, and at some point, it's you begin asking yourself, am I going mad? Am I going crazy? And quite obviously, though, the answer is that there's a lot of people out there that have witnessed the same exact thing that Austin Hauser and Chad Granger experienced in this particular incident. Um, what are your thoughts on that, Roger?
Yeah, I mean, to keep it simple, I definitely agree with you. And when I watched that part of the documentary and just how, you know, they talked about the first time seeing this, that changed their paradigm. They really, you know, they were survival experts, right? They're out there filming for their YouTube channel, right? But then they came across something that they've been told their whole life doesn't exist, and all of a sudden they're staring it face to face. And it's really interesting in the documentary because they talk a little bit about going back and forth, like, oh, it's a bear. Wait, no, bears don't, bears don't stand on two legs. And the behavior was different. And then kind of like dawned on them that what they were seeing is something that they shouldn't be seeing. And I think that's the way they felt and is the way that you felt and the way that I feel when I experience something that is of that realm, is unknown or paranormal or supernatural, the high strangeness that we see. It shocks your reality, and you have to come to grips with the fact that I just saw something that my rational mind cannot explain. And how do I deal with that? And I think that both of them coming forward, participating in the documentary, is probably really therapeutic and helpful for them.
And you just hit the nail on the head, Roger. That's the importance. That's why you and I are doing what we do with the Soul of the Unexplained, because number one, it's therapeutic for both you and I. And the thing that has, and we've talked about this a number of times as we've talked in the past about Phenomicon, and particularly the Voice of the Believers event at Phenomicon, where you listen to these people that are telling you their stories, their experiences, and the most amazing thing happens is you gather strength and courage from listening to the stories and the accounts and the experiences of other people. And when you start feeling that, when you start to learn that you're not alone, that you're not the only person that's had weird shit happen to them, it does help. It may not provide the all the answers, or even any answer for that matter, but that's a pretty huge step, Roger, to know that you're not alone, to know that you're not the only person that has experienced something that is not supposed to exist according to our rational, you know, train of thought and what we're taught and conditioned, as it were, to believe that when we start seeing things that are only supposed to exist in the realm of science fiction and comic books and legends and mythology, it has it changes you. It changes you forever. And to know that you're not alone, and to hear stories of these two brave gentlemen, Chad and Austin, um, I was really moved by it. And that's one other thing that I want to touch upon with this particular documentary, Roger, is the credibility and just the sincerity. I guess that's the best word, the sincerity of every one of the people that appeared on camera talking about their own experience. These two gentlemen, Chad and Austin, I didn't once get the impression that these were guys that were out there to get famous or to gain some kind of personal gain from appearing in this documentary. When you watch them relaying their experience, you can tell that this is something that truly shook them to the core of who they are. There was there was fear in some parts of their account, and these are two guys that seem to be hardened outdoorsmen, grew up in the outdoors, grew up in the wilderness. They were at one. They loved being out there, and then to have an experience like this, it shook them to the foundation of who they are. And to hear accounts like that from people that are like that um, only adds a layer of sincerity and credibility for me. That's what I got from watching their particular testimony.
Yeah, I agree. And as we go through this, and as your listeners watch this documentary, I think you're going to see that there's a variety of different people from all walks of life that have experience, and it's nice to see their sincerity, but also what they've opened, like they share their life, right? They open up about what they've done with that experience. And, I think that it takes a lot of courage for people to come on to a documentary like this. I don't know if I would be comfortable in standing in front of a documentary and sharing some of the stuff that I've seen, just for the fear of, that stigma again. It would be something that I'd have to, push myself to do. But no, kudos to everybody, especially these two gentlemen, to, kick off this documentary in that way and share their experience.
Completely agree. So the documentary then kind of shifts to, of course, it's if you're paying any kind of homage to the legend of Bigfoot or Sasquatch, you absolutely have to make mention of the famous Patterson Gimlin footage that was shot in 1967 in Northern California by Roger Patterson and Bob Giblin. And of course, I would imagine that most of you that are watching this have seen that legendary footage that alleges to show a Sasquatch walking basically across a stony creek bed in Northern California, way up in the mountains in back in 1967. And as with as with any realm of the unexplained, be it UFOs or Bigfoot or what have you, you're going to have your fair share of skeptics and debunkers. And of course, there's a difference between a true skeptic and a debunker. A true skeptic maintains an open mind. They're kind of agnostic about it. They're not closing the door entirely to the possibility. They just want to see some kind of, absolute verifiable, quantifiable data and proof to back up the extraordinary claim. Whereas a debunker has already made up their mind that such a thing cannot and does not and should not exist. And no matter what kind of evidence you provide, it's not going to be good enough. And so obviously, this Patterson Gimlin footage has been shown all over. The first time, Roger, that I think I saw it was back in the 1970s. There was a great TV show called In Search of that was hosted by Leonard Nimoy of Star
Mhm.
Trek fame. And that was the first time that I ever saw this Patterson Gimlin footage. And of course, I was a very young child when I saw it. And the thing is, and Dr. Jeff Meldrum actually uh, has he's one of these people, these uh, accredited academics who believes that the footage shot by Patterson and Gimlin is in fact authentic. And there has been a number of 21st century analysis done on this footage, and there is nothing that indicates that this footage was in fact some guy or girl in a gorilla suit or in a costume of some kind. And we won't go into detail why, because we could probably devote a whole entire episode
Oh yeah,
just to that footage.
easily.
But I also tend to side with Dr. Meldrum that that's probably the single most compelling bit of evidence, as it were, for the existence of this Sasquatch creature. And I think it can't be overlooked that this was filmed on an actual film camera. It wasn't filmed in a digital camera to where it could be doctored and, made to look like something extraordinary. I think that they did in fact capture everything that they alleged to have captured in that little short film that shows that creature walking across that creek bed, making humongous strides. The way that the musculature moves, the posture, the way that I don't see that being anything other than, quite frankly, I believe that that is very compelling evidence that if a Sasquatch is a real thing, I think there you go. We have it on film already.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. And yeah, if you haven't seen that footage, definitely look on the internet. That footage is all over the place. It's very compelling footage, and I'm definitely glad that they included that as part of this documentary because I think at that point, right, once they released that, that kind of started the Bigfoot craze here. Um, in America, and people searching for it and people's passion for Bigfoot has just continued on and on, right? That passion for exploring, for finding, and again, that evidence. And it's exciting too because, you think about what they captured on film, it a lot of that and what you see and what's been described as that traditional Bigfoot is backed up with the oral traditions and things of the Native Americans here on this continent. And it's I don't know, it just opens up a lot of exciting possibilities, right? Of that these things are intelligent, they know what is going on, they can traverse this terrain, right? They know how to live within our modern society, but keep themselves pretty hidden. And
Right.
that's kind of mind blowing to me.
Absolutely. So the the film then goes on to state that of 800, there were 866 sightings of Sasquatch in Washington state alone, which makes it the number one hotspot for Sasquatch in North America. And that particular stat comes from a gentleman by the name of Scott Tompkins, who is the creator of the Bigfoot Mapping Project, which is this great 21st century kind of aggregation of all known Bigfoot sightings and experiences. It's really, really cool and something to see. So check that out if you guys have interest in this particular subject, the Bigfoot Mapping Project. Dr. Meldrum then goes on to say, quote unquote, quote rather, the fact that they have remained unrecognized or unestablished as a species simply rests on their rarity and other aspects of their reported behavior. They're nocturnal, they're solitary, they're far ranging, they're very generalized. Those are characteristics of any animal species that render it very difficult to study, let alone trap or obtain a specimen in the wild. Close quote. So, again, there, Dr. Meldrum is providing a very sound academic argument that the fact that they have remained unrecognized and unestablished, you know, is an indicator of how rare they are. And quite obviously, there is, some people would say an intelligence to these creatures that is involved that allows them to remain as elusive as they are. And then the documentary goes and talks about an experience of a Bigfoot experiencer in Oklahoma by the name of Arla Williams. And she saw a juvenile male Bigfoot in the 1950s when she was a child. And that's a great little story that she tells. And interesting to note about the state of Oklahoma is that Oklahoma ranks ninth in the United States for Bigfoot sightings. And in 2021, a $3 million bounty was offered in the state of Oklahoma for the capture of a live, unharmed Bigfoot. Yeah, folks, good luck with that. Have fun storming the castle.
Yeah, for some reason, Jim, I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think so either. And there's a cool moment in there where one of the researchers says that you know a lot of the one of the most famous arguments that the debunkers and the naysayers like to use is, okay, well, if Bigfoot is real, then why haven't we found any skeletal remains? And that's a very rational question to ask, right? A very reasonable question to ask. But the answer is a little more complicated, and that's for a number of reasons. Okay. Now, Roger, I grew up constantly playing in the woods in upstate New York, camping, spending, days on end in the wilderness, just, trying to live off the land, and I loved doing it as a teenager. And during my entire time in that wilderness, guess how many skeletal remains of a deer or a bear or a coyote or a wolf or even a bird? Guess how many skeletal remains I found?
Probably zero.
That's absolutely correct. Part of the reason for that, Roger, is because you have to understand the way that organic creatures, organisms decompose whether they die a natural death or whether they are, killed by a predator or some other means. When they die, you leave a body out in the environment. We already know once a human being dies or any other animal dies, the decomposition process begins immediately. Your internal organs start to break down. There's the whole topic of thanatochemistry, and you can learn about all this stuff, and you begin to realize that within the space of probably about, I'd say, 10 within 2 weeks for sure, if not sooner in some environments, you're not going to have much of a trace of this animal or this creature, because nature takes over. It just naturally breaks down, and you just have scavenger animals that will come and aid in it in the decomposition, and they'll consume the flesh, and animals will eat the bones of other animals to get the nutrients and calcium from the marrow that's in the bones of uh, these decomposing animals. That's what nature does. So I've talked to all kinds of people that spend a great deal of time in the wilderness, and I have yet to come across anybody who has come across the remains of a bear, or maybe over the span of 30 or 40 years of going out in the universe in the wilderness, they will find bones of a deer or an elk or something like that, but very, very, very rare. So imagine if we're talking about a creature that is as intelligent as these Sasquatch or these Bigfoot creatures seem to be, then if they want to keep their death hidden from us or from anybody else, then it's perfectly reasonable to think that they would be able to do that. We have no idea if they have, we don't know what level of intelligence they have. There are some that speculate that they are more intelligent than we are. There are some that speculate that they may not be as intelligent as we are. We just don't know. So the fact that people say that there's never been a body recovered, is that the be all end all of confirming one way or another conclusively as to whether or not they do or do not exist? I say absolutely not. Um, would it be nice if they recovered one? Well, obviously, that'd be great. Anytime you have hard scientific data, hard scientific evidence to prove, having a body, habeas corpus, right? But
Well,
still, what are your thoughts on that?
yeah, no, I think if you look at population size, I mean, yeah, one of the most prominent species here on Earth is mankind, humankind, and we don't know the population of these creatures, right? It could be very minimal, and so you're not, and I don't think this is necessarily an apples to apples comparison, but I think it's the closest thing that I can get to is that we talked about on Expedition Bigfoot, Dr. Maria Mayor. She's an American, she's a doctor, she's an American anthropologist, primatologist. Well, when she talked to us at Phenomicon about her search for new species and things like this, right? So if somebody had said, "Hey, I have seen this new species of lemur," right? people could say, hey, you know what? No, we've never seen that. No, you're seeing something else, or that doesn't exist. Well, she found it. She found the smallest species of lemur, and it was a new type of species, right?
Right.
So just because it hadn't been found before and it was really rare on the island of Madagascar, didn't mean that it wasn't there. It was there, but it sure took a lot of, I think, looking for this, right? Following clues and trails. And, I think a certain amount of luck and being in the right place at the right time, that she was able to do this. And I think if you follow that methodology for Bigfoot, again, right? Like these experiencers were in the right place at the right time, and we're seeing more evidence of that. But just because we don't find, you know, skeletons or scat or these different types of things, but, I mean, they have found trace elements of hair and, watch Expedition Bigfoot. And I think in season 2, you'll be a little bit surprised of one of the things that they did find and confirm there. But I'll let our viewers take a look at that at another time. But again, just because we haven't discovered, you know, like burials or skeletons and things like that, well, doesn't mean they're there. I know bears are out in the wood. I've never come across a skeleton of a bear, any type of bear, grizzly, brown, black, you name it, right?
Hmm.
But I know they're there. So,
Completely agree. And so the from there it progresses to where they have a gentleman who Bigfoot enthusiasts will know this man by name very well, Mr. Ron Moorhead. And in 1971, he was involved with a the capturing of what is now known as the Sierra Sounds. And what it was is in 1971, Ron Moorhead went camping up in the Central Sierra Mountains in California, way back into the wilderness, like 8 miles back into the Sierra Mountains, to this special camp that his friends had taken him to. And they had this encounter that was just absolutely extraordinary. And they were able to capture it on a recording of what these creatures sounded like. Now, they weren't able to take any photos of it, and I don't believe they. I'm not sure if they actually saw it in person, but these creatures were definitely around the perimeter of their encampment at nighttime, to the extent that it scared them enough that they actually had to hide inside of a tree. And if you really want to have a great detail of this particular story, watch Missing 411. Dave Pilates, former police officer and detective, has this great series that I believe is still, you can still view it for free on Amazon Prime. Missing 411, The Hunted, I think, Roger, is what it is.
yep.
And it actually has that a great in-depth segment on Ron Moorhead and his experience in the Sierra Mountains. And folks, when you hear what the Sierra Sounds sound like, um, it's otherworldly, isn't it, Roger? I mean, it sounds like something that's human, but at the same time, something that's not. It certainly does not sound like any ape or primate that I've ever heard. Doesn't sound like a gorilla. Certainly not a. It's not a mountain lion. It's not a bear. Um, but it's clearly some kind of creature that is vocalizing and using some kind of actual language. And that, to me, the importance of that cannot be overlooked. So the Sierra Sounds are one of those things that, for me, Roger, is a piece of evidence that is very fascinating and very compelling to me. Really, it's kind of like that audio recording that we referred to in our last episode, talking about the that audio that Caleb from Skinwalker Ranch let us listen to, that is just unlike anything we've ever heard. And these Sierra Sounds are very similar to that. What are your thoughts on the Sierra Sounds?
Yeah, yeah, no. There have been multiple shows where Ron Moorhead has shared those sounds, and he'll people will call them in on their Bigfoot expeditions, right? Because they've heard very similar things. And when you hear what he has recorded, and the vocalization and the back and forth, it does match a lot of what other people have recorded out in the field with their encounters of Bigfoot, especially um, during the night. And, I think back to Dr. Meldrum's point that they are nocturnal creatures, and right, there is some form of intelligence, because it would seem, and I think part of this documentary also um, talks a little bit about that these vocalizations and things like that actually, are could be a language, right? That these beings are talking to each other in a way, or telling each other locations, things that are happening, just as, if somebody were to come into your home or territory, right? Or if you have guards posted, things like that, where you'd go back and forth and let, you would defend your territory. And so I do find it very striking that the very great similarities between what we could listen to from Caleb and Ron Moorhead are strikingly similar, as well as some of the sounds that they've caught on Expedition Bigfoot um, are very, very similar as well. So yeah, I think there is some stock to what Ron has captured, and I definitely think that he's helping take away that stigma with the things that his experience, because he listened to that a long time ago, and he's helped a lot of different people. So yeah, very, very interesting.
Could not agree more. And I think the Sierra sounds, along with the Patterson Gimlin footage, probably constitute the best 1-2 punch that we have right now
Yeah.
of really, truly compelling evidence that there is something out there that appears to be that appears to substantiate a lot of these myths and legends that we hear from the indigenous tribes and people that have actually encountered and experienced one of these creatures out in the wilderness. And so those are probably the two, for me anyway, the two most compelling bits of evidence that we have to lean on to show that there really is something out there. And
Yeah.
I,
Agreed.
I firmly believe I believe that. I believe there is something out there. Um, and I think it's only a matter of time until we have something else that is of even greater value to kind of further substantiate these claims. And I think what they're experiencing on Expedition Bigfoot, particularly as you were saying, Roger, the second and third seasons, wow, really, really compelling information and evidence that is being captured by Russ Acord and Dr. Mireya Mayor and Ronnie LeBlanc. Really, really compelling stuff. So we're gonna dive into the next segment. And Roger, this is something that doesn't necessarily. I mean, you can apply it to the Bigfoot phenomena, but it's something that you and I have actually talked about a number of times. And what it is it's this little segment that features a clinical psychologist or psychiatrist, and he talks about uh, suppressed memories versus repressed memories. And we touched upon this in the shadow being episode that we did. And so when I watched this documentary, this A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, there is this little segment that features this clinical psychologist, and I'm going to read to you folks basically a couple of quotes that I think are really really outstanding and really really merit a lot of thought. So the gentleman's name is Dr. Michael Adams, and he is a clinical psychologist from the University of Miami, and also he studied at the Yale School of Medicine. And he has over 90,000 clinical patient hours. And he says, quote, we all have psychological defenses that help us go out into the world and navigate our experiences. So everybody has them. Anybody who has normal interactions in the world has to have psychological defenses. They're neither good or bad, they just are. So, close quote. So, as you can see, folks, he discusses the rationalization, which is when you see something extraordinary and you then try to rationalize it away. And we talked about that briefly already, Roger, where
Mhm.
where it's like you're in this instance with a Bigfoot, you would say, okay, I thought I saw a Bigfoot, but what I probably saw was just a large bear. That's what your brain, that's what we're conditioned to rationalize away, right? We try to look for ways, this inherent psychological defense, if you will, that our brain just kind of jumps to automatically. Well, he then talks about both suppression and repression. And so regarding suppression, he says, quote, suppression is a conscious act where I just saw something, where I've seen something, but it's disturbing to me. So I'm not going to talk to other people about it. And I'm not even going to admit it much to myself. I don't want to relive what I just experienced. So, Roger, that's what suppressed thought or suppressed memory is, where you are making the conscious decision not to revisit that, not to revisit what you saw. Okay. Then he talks about repression. And regarding repression, he says, quote, repression, on the other hand, is an unconscious process where we push it so deeply down where we're not aware of it. We don't even think about it. Close quote. So, repressed memories, or when you're repressing something, it's almost like a defense mechanism where you experience something that is so extraordinary or so traumatic that your mind just kind of compartmentalizes it and files it away, so that in the future, if you experience it again, you'll be able to, your mind will recognize it. Ah, this is something that scared us, this is something that we fear, or something along those lines. So in my experience, Roger, getting back to my shadow being experience, my hat man experience, it's clear to me now that what I was dealing with there were repressed memories. It was something that was traumatic to me as a child, and so to protect myself from it, my brain, which is like the world's greatest quantum computer, right? Because it's like this thing that's constantly recording your mind, your brain, your consciousness, whatever you want to call it, is always in record mode, right?
Yep.
And so it's not at all uncommon for people to experience either this suppression, where maybe it's the fear of being mocked or teased or made fun of. And so because of that fear, you don't want to talk about the fact that you saw a Bigfoot, or maybe you saw a UFO or a UAP, or you saw a ghost, or you saw something that you just can't explain away, that just can't be, rationally handled, as it were. So, but then you also have repression, where your mind does that for you, and it's just like it's something. We hear of these people that experience these traumatic experiences, whether it's physical abuse, sexual abuse, psychological torment or torture, and the mind, just for whatever reason, represses those memories. And it's interesting how our brain, and the psychology of how all that works. That it's kind of like this built-in defense mechanism that our brains have. And I personally find that fascinating. How about you, Raj?
Yeah, yeah, I think that I mean, definitely our consciousness and our brain, we experience so much as people all the time that whether it's something super traumatic, through a variety of different reasons, we'll either suppress or repress. And I think it's a good mechanism, especially for those people that have something truly terrifying happen to them. And like you said, it can be for a variety of reasons, situations, things that horrible things that I would never want to go through. But it's the body's way and the mind's way of coping with it. Um, and preventing further damage either to the mind or to the body at that time. So you either suppress it yourself because it's too disturbing, you don't want to go back to it, or the mind's just natural defenses kick in. And I mean, you can see that especially in our modern day society where, so many things happen to so many people, and unfortunately, our world is not a kind world, and people are cruel to each other, and a lot of things are repressed that way. And I think it's the same thing with the supernatural, right? You see something, whether a child or adult, that you're just not ready for, your mind is going to tuck that away. You're not going to remember it because it's so terrifying to come to that reality for whatever reason, right? That natural defense goes up. And I think it's a great quote by that clinical psychologist. So,
Yeah, I completely agree.
yeah, with that, again, like I don't know, just looking past my own experience with um I guess traumatic situations. There have been I'll you know, I served a mission for my church, and just thinking back about some of the experiences that I had, it was definitely it was a great experience, but it was a very different experience for me. I was in another country, speaking a different language, and I think that there were parts of there that my mind, just because as a 19-year-old, young adult, I I don't think there are things that my mind was ready for, or that this world had prepared me for. And I will find at times where either I'll be talking about something with somebody or reading through something, and then all of a sudden I have these memories that come back from that time. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that was kind of a scary experience, or that was like, I don't remember that happening, but now I'm remembering it, and you can kind of feel that rush of adrenaline. And because there were some situations I went on my mission for my religious organization, my church, down to Nicaragua, right? So beautiful people, beautiful country, but a lot of situations that were dangerous, especially for a North American, Caucasian individual down there, especially with the whole Contras and Sandinista thing. So for me, it was, um, again, that I think it just proves the point to me that, and this documentary, that we do not only consciously suppress, but we also like our mind will, suppress those memories as well. Um, and yeah, and I think that, and I'll just say this to wrap up really quickly, but when it comes to the paranormal in me, I experienced a lot of things from a very young age, and um, I think that there are things that I probably don't even remember. Um, because there are times that I'll be like, oh, wait a minute, I remember this when it happened, when I was at a younger age. And so I think that, with the realm of the supernatural, things will happen that people will automatically, your body's defenses will come in and protect you from that.
Completely agree. And for those of you folks that heard the doorbell and the knock on the door, that was tacos being delivered. So got tacos for when we're done, Raj, to celebrate. But
Yeah,
I
very good.
completely agree, Raj. And that's one of the kind of pleasant surprises that were in this documentary that I wasn't expecting to find in a documentary like this, of having a clinical psychologist who actually talks about how that's how the human mind works. And put yourself, folks, in the shoes of somebody that has experienced one of these extraordinary events. And again, it can be Bigfoot, it can be Sasquatch, um, UFO, UAP, whatever the case may be. And we're all going to react to that experience differently. There are some people that are going to they're going to find a renewed sense of vigor and excitement in their life. And then there are some people that are going to experience a great deal of fear and confusion and not knowing how to properly compartmentalize it. And being able to understand that, and that there is some sensitivity involved when we're talking about experiencers who experience these extraordinary things. So thanks for sharing that with us, Roger, about your experience there in Nicaragua. I can only imagine what it must have been like being down there. So Dr. Adams, he says he makes another point, which I think is really important for us to make, and this will be one of the last points that we talk about for this documentary. He says essentially that the thinking outside the box is actually healthy, and people that denigrate or mock or berate experiencers are fearful because it would upend their view of the world. And good mental health requires some degree of flexibility where that kind of thing is concerned. And having a worldview that is so narrow that one thing can put into disarray everything that you believe is generally not healthy. So the point that he makes ultimately is that people that thrive on debunking and mocking people that have these kind of experiences are essentially psychotic because they're closer to mental illness than people that actually experience these things and are brave enough to talk about them. And again, it ties into that whole stigma. Why is there a stigma, Roger? Well, there's a stigma because we've got people that love to beat their chests, and say you're all crazy. You're all, and that goes for any one of a number of things. It can be UFOs, UAPs, Bigfoot. Uh, your belief as a Christian. There are people out there that will mock you for that because you can't provide them with proof that God actually exists. Heaven forbid. And you know what? You have to approach people like that and say, okay, if that's what you believe, fine. I know I believe what I believe, and I don't need you to tell me that I'm right or wrong. And I reached the point, Roger, where that's how I feel about my shadow being experience is I don't need anybody to believe me because I experienced it myself. I know what I saw. I know what happened to me. I still can't I still can't figure it out. I'm still having difficulty putting it all together and figuring out the why, but it happened to me and nobody can take that experience away from me. And whenever we see people that go on the attack, that feel the need to expose you for being a fraud or that just make those claims, they are people that are operating most of the time, I think, from a place of extreme insecurity because they don't want to entertain the very notion that something extraordinary may in fact be real. And I have nothing but pity for those people because they are so close-minded, they are so insecure that they can't allow any leeway for something to exist that may be beyond or greater than them. Simple as that. And so to have this Dr. Adams really kind of drive that point home was a really unexpected, pleasant surprise for me. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's nice to know that you actually have professionals in their field that are tackling some of our modern day issues around mental health and things like that, because there are a lot of things that do happen to people that are just not explainable with our modern day technology or science. But um, despite that, these experiences are real. And right? To have more people like that that are credentialed and studying these things in our corner it gives me hope actually for the future, right?
Right.
And that it will release the stigma around these things. It should be okay to talk about the experiences that you have. No one should force their view upon somebody else, and then people should respect that, you've had your same experiences and they shouldn't be forcing anything upon you, right? That's how we share this world. We learn from each other and we learn from our different experiences, and that's what continues to make, you know, um, great friendships, great understanding. It continues our knowledge because you can learn from other people. You don't necessarily have to agree to it. That's fine. That's what we as adults and the human race we get to do. We get to share this huge planet with all of its beauty and high strangeness, as I would call it. And we all have our point of view on things. And I think that that's great. And as long as we can continue to have this discussion in a respectful way, that's the thing that matters most. And that is what will help us progress forward to, in my opinion, a more enlightened future.
I could not agree more, Roger, and thank you for saying that, because and for those of you that are watching that are skeptical, again, there is nothing wrong with being skeptical.
Right.
But for those of you that just want to put the kibosh on all of this and throw everything out, toss the proverbial baby out with the bathwater, um, I would ask why. Why do you feel the need to react in such a way? What is it honestly harming you when people are opening up about experiences that they had? Now, are there people out there that just make up this stuff out of whole cloth? And are there hoaxers out there? The answer
Yeah.
is obviously yes, there is. But you can usually pick those people out pretty quick. Um, just a little bit of, close examination, you can pick out the ones that really truly have uh, potential, illness issues going on. And I'm not at all going to deny that fact that there are people out there that are like that. There are people out there that want to take advantage of people, and there are people that are willing to. They want so desperately to belong to something greater than them that they'll glom onto anything. They'll believe anything in the realm of the extraordinary without giving its due diligence. And I would encourage everyone out there to give this topic and every other topic its due diligence. Do your own homework, do your own research, and use that brain that God gave you, regardless of how big or how small it is, or how educated or uneducated you may be. There's always a chance for you to learn more by doing your own research. And Roger and I encourage everybody to do that. But always maintain an open mind. You have to be, if you're truly going to claim yourself to be somebody who is, scientific in your approach, debunkers are not scientific in their approach, because they already go into whatever situation it is with their mind already made up. And then they just try to organize whatever data that they find, they cherry pick whatever they want that's going to support their their finding that this is all bullshit. And you've got to be careful of people like that. But you also have to be, as difficult as it is for me to say this, particularly being a New Yorker, you have to have patience with the debunkers. It doesn't mean you have to like them. You don't have to, the best thing to do is just take the high road. When they go low, go high. Take the high road. Don't get baited into debates and discussions with somebody who has already made up their mind about what this may or may not be, because the truth is we don't know. Neither Roger or I know the answer to any of these things, but we maintain an open mind. The only thing that Roger and I can speak to with any degree of certainty is what each of us have experienced individually.
Yeah.
And for me, Roger, it may be different for you, but for me, again, I don't need you or anybody else to believe when I tell people my experience, because it was mine. And if people don't want to believe what I experienced, that's fine. I don't need them to. I don't need them to say, "Wow, Jimm, that was, oh man, I mean, if they do, great." But at the same time, I'm not foolish enough to not recognize that a lot of times these extraordinary experiences, again, whether they be with a shadow being like I had, or any of the number of encounters that you've had, Roger, or people that have seen a UFO or UAP, a lot of times these are individual based experiences that you experience by yourself with nobody else around. And so by nature, you can't really provide any proof other than your own testimony of what you experienced. And for some people, that's just never going to be good enough. And you have to be able to be um, sensible enough to accept that there's going to be some people that just, no matter what you tell them, uh, they're just not gonna they're not gonna believe you, and you have to be okay with that because that's just the nature of what this greater universe of the unexplained is all about. Um, am I wrong in that, Roger?
No, no, I think you're 100% right there. Like that's, I know people seek validation and everything, but at the end of the day, your experiences are your own. And right, like you shouldn't have to if no one believes you, that's okay. You know what you experienced, and I don't, it's nice to have validation, and I think that that's part of what our podcast is doing, is to help people that are uncomfortable in saying things that have happened to them on a paranormal scale. Right, that there is a support group and people that will listen and understand and not pass judgment. But at the end of the day, right, what you experience is your own experience and you own it and it's real. The experiences that I've had are real, right? And I don't need anybody to tell me that, say like, oh, that's really cool. That doesn't make it any more or less real. It still happened, I know. And if somebody says, Roger, you're full of crap, I don't believe anything that you say, that's okay, right? They haven't experienced that, and I'm not going to fault them for that. That's their view. And I hope that when, if people do feel the need to tell other people that, well, that just can't happen, or try to disprove it or debunk it, you don't let that get you down. Don't worry about it, right? They will likely have an experience someday that will rock their worldview, and it'll be up to them to either continue denying that they've had something that's strange that they just can't explain, or they'll come clean and they will be like, you know what, you're right. I was wrong in the past. And, own your individual experiences, own those things that you know are real, and don't be afraid to share them. And at the same time, if somebody, throws dirt at you, as Jim said, don't throw dirt back. Just take the high road and know that you're a better person and that we're on this path together. And it's okay. Not everyone's going to believe, and they don't have to. And that's the great part about our community, is that we can still experience these things, and we know what we experienced are real. So don't let that get you down. And again, I would encourage anybody, if you're feeling down, or if you have some people that you've had experiences where people just don't believe you, and that's frustrating, don't hesitate to reach out to the Soul of the Unexplained. We're here to listen and we're here to help. And if you need a listening ear, we're here. We're not here to disprove or anything like that, but we just want people to understand and stay safe out there. It's a crazy world that we live in, and I love this topic of Bigfoot. And with this documentary, I think that ultimately, in the end, that if you've had an experience like that, it will be even more enlightening. If you haven't had an experience like that, it will open your mind to the actual possibility that there are things out there that we just haven't been able to concretely come up with in the world of science to say that, yeah, I can statistically prove that this is, you know, 100% a species. But again, together we'll get there.
Amen, Raj. I could not agree more. And just want to echo what you said, folks. If you ever just need somebody to listen to the experience that you had, reach out to either me or Roger. And there will be no judgment. We know what it's like being an experiencer. Now we don't know what it's like being a Bigfoot experiencer. Although I could take off my shirt right now, and that's probably pretty close to being a Sasquatch experience. But uh, public decency laws would prohibit me from doing that. Not to mention my wife would probably throw something at me. So sorry, no gratuitous nudity this time, folks. Maybe next time. But anyway, seriously though, folks, as Roger says, we are here. The Soul of the Unexplained exists to break down that stigma that seems to follow this greater realm of the unexplained, the paranormal, whatever you want to call it. And we are always there to listen, if nothing else. So I want to close up, Raj, with two particular quotes from this documentary. And the first one comes from a gentleman by the name of Toby Johnson. And Toby Johnson, many of you, particularly those of you that have attended Phenomicon, know that Toby was the kind of the MC of Phenomicon last year, and I believe he's coming back this year for 2024 to be the master of ceremonies as well. But Toby Johnson is he's obviously got a strong interest in Sasquatch and Bigfoot. He's featured very prominently in this documentary, A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed. But Toby Johnson is he has this thing called Owl Moon Lab and Strange Brow podcast. That's brow, Brau, kind of like the German word for brow. And so he's really got an interest in this subject of Bigfoot and Sasquatch and paranormal. And he has a quote that really resonated rather strongly with me, and I want to give him props and respect for this because he said much more eloquently and much more articulate than I think I did tonight. But he's talking about the subject of skeptics versus debunkers and whether or not people believe you when you tell them about one of these kinds of extraordinary experiences. And he says, quote, I don't entertain a lot of motives when it comes to the skeptic because they're impure. I mean, if people really want to know something and they're skeptical because they doubt, that's natural. I can deal with that. But if people want to mock and they want to, have their punchline and to say, oh, you didn't do your homework, you're lazy. Well, they don't know what I know, and that's good enough for me. I know what I know, and it's made me a better person. This isn't everybody's journey. Not everybody's supposed to take the red pill, and you have to let those people go. You can't force this message down their throat. Sometimes they're skeptics, but sometimes they're assholes. Close quote. And Roger, that pretty well sums up what you and I have just been talking about. And I think that's a very, very good way of putting it. Not everybody is supposed to take the red pill. And if you've never seen The Matrix, then I can't help you with that. But that's obviously a reference from The Matrix of opening your mind to the world and the universe around you as they really are. And I love that. Don't even get me started on The Matrix, Raj. I love that movie. And the second one
That's
was
a whole
great.
other episode. We could
Yeah,
go down the rabbit
I
hole
love The
there, but
Matrix. I love The Matrix Reloaded. It kind of lost its way after that, but oh my gosh, the first film, still love it. And the last quote that I want to read from is from Daryl Wilson, and the documentary, the last the last segment of the documentary features the story of Daryl Wilson. And Daryl Wilson again is this rancher who lives in the Vernal, Utah area. And 10 years ago, he was diagnosed with a really severe melanoma on the back of his head. And he was told that it was terminal, that he was going to die. And so, shortly after getting that news, him and his wife traveled to Alaska to go visit his daughter and son in law and their grandchildren. And so, one of the days that they were up there in Alaska, they went out fishing on this river. And while they were out fishing, Daryl Wilson and his son-in-law, up on a hill from the river, they saw what they initially thought was a big bear. And then, upon closer examination, the behavior clearly was not a bear that they were looking at. And he goes on to tell this remarkable story of what it was like for him to transition from being a non-believer or maybe a casual believer that such things are possible into you have eyes on this creature. You are watching it. And what's more, you have a witness there with you in the form of his son in law, who is also experiencing this creature for the very first time. And Roger, there's just something about the way that Daryl Wilson told his story. You can tell by the tone of his voice, you can tell by his body language and his facial expressions. There is no doubt whatsoever in my mind that Daryl Wilson experienced this creature in the exact same manner that he says that he did. I have not to this day watched a testimony from a Bigfoot experiencer, an eyewitness that has been as compelling and as moving personally as the testimony that Daryl Wilson gave at the end of this documentary. And for me, that was one of the things that kind of moved me off the fence, as it were, and made me really think, okay, I really need to give this Bigfoot subject a closer examination. And I just have to tip my hat to Daryl Wilson for having the strength and the courage to share his story in the manner that he did. And I have to tip my hat to Brett Eichenberger and the folks that put this documentary together, because this documentary did more to help me realize that there really is something to this Bigfoot phenomenon. And this documentary is hands down the best Bigfoot documentary that I've ever seen. Just the way that they approached it, the witnesses, the experiencers, the subject matter experts, the scientists, anthropologists that they had were all just absolutely, it hit the mark on every aspect, including the music. And of course, Raj, you know me with music. Music is, I'm all about the music. Even the music in this documentary was perfectly orchestrated. And I just want to read this little quote from Daryl Wilson, and then I'll turn it over to you, Roger. But regarding his experience that he had in Alaska with his son-in-law, and why he chose to share his story in this documentary for the whole world to see. He says, quote, "My purpose in sharing this story with you is to bless those who have not been able to share their story and have been mocked and ridiculed and belittled." Close quote. And for me, folks, that's what it's all about, is having that strength and that courage to come forward. And while in my case it wasn't a Bigfoot that I saw, I wrestled for a full year, as Roger can attest, and as my whole family can attest. I struggled with coming forward and sharing my experience because there is that unavoidable stigma attached to anything of that unexplained nature, right? And so when you come across somebody like Daryl Wilson, who, when you watch his testimony, when you watch this documentary, and folks, if you only watch one part of this documentary, watch Daryl Wilson's segment. It will, I guarantee you, if you watch it with an open mind, chances are very good it's going to move you just as strongly as it moved me. There is nothing, in my view, there is nothing more persuasive than the testimony of an eyewitness, the testimony of an experiencer, somebody that was there and had eyes on it or that experienced it. And Daryl Wilson's testimony and his story of his experience with Bigfoot and the passion that he has. And thankfully, he's still with us. He calls himself God's miracle. And if you ever have the privilege of meeting Daryl Wilson, you will see that he is truly a humble man, a very simple man. And I mean that as a sincere compliment. And I absolutely believe 100% that Daryl experienced exactly what he experienced. And because of that, and because of so many other things in this documentary, I can't toss the whole Bigfoot thing on the scrap heap. I refuse to. I think there is something there. And Roger, as we mentioned at the onset of this, there is a sequel of sorts to this documentary that's called Paranormal Bigfoot, by the same director, Brett Eichenberger. And we're going to review that in the not too distant future. And that's going to dive into some of the more of the paranormal aspects of Bigfoot, where, is it an interdimensional entity? Is it associated with the UFO phenomenon? So that's what the second documentary dives into. And I'm here to tell you, folks, Paranormal Bigfoot is another one I strongly recommend that you watch. And Roger and I will do an analysis of that one as well. But Roger, that kind of ties things up. What are your final thoughts on this documentary, A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed?
Yeah, no, I agree with 100% everything that you said. And just my closing thoughts on it are it, it definitely is an eye-opening documentary. I think it was very well made and put together. And I do feel that the people that they have interviewed on there um, are sharing the stories that the best that they can. And it's a really good mix of just everyday people, but also, you've got PhDs, you've got doctors in there adding their analysis into these personal experiences as well. So, um, for me, two thumbs up. I definitely enjoy it, and I think you as our subscribers will enjoy it. And it was kind of a fun evening, Jim, just to divert from some of the topics that we've been previously talking about and starting to discuss some of these documentary and these series. And yeah, I would agree again, everything that you stated, Jim, and I would invite you, our listeners, to um, give it a watch and give us feedback on what you thought the movie was like and how you thought the documentary went, and definitely share with us any of your experiences, whether it's Bigfoot, UAP, paranormal, ghosts, things like that. We are always wanting more stories and listening to what you guys have to say out there. And something that I just am going to mention that Jim and I talked about before our show is typically with our podcast, we discuss a lot of different issues and things of that nature, whether it's paranormal, Skinwalker Ranch, things of those nature. If you guys have any feedback on what we can call our documentary series here versus just saying, hey, it's the Soul of the Unexplained documentary series, because we want to review some of these documentaries out there, both good, they could be bad as well, just to give you guys our honest thoughts on that and get feedback. So if you guys have feedback on our episode or want to understand or have us talk about something more in depth, or want to kind of mix up our cadence, definitely give us the feedback so we can take this back and make any of our documentary reviews even better for you to listen.
Absolutely, Raj. And of course, folks, we have to say that the reason why we didn't show you any footage from the documentary is just simply because of copyright issues. We haven't had a chance to talk with the film's director to seek permission, and if the director can even give us permission, we don't know offhand who has the rights for the film. So that's why we just simply talked about it, and also because Roger and I are purveyors of the cheap ass no frills podcast, right, Raj? But we hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. And I have to say, folks, if I were to give a star rating to A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, I would give it a solid 10 out of 10 stars. I firmly believe that if all documentaries within the realm of the paranormal were as well executed and well presented as this particular documentary is, Brett Eichenberger and his team just absolutely knocked this one out of the park. Um, and Roger and I have seen some pretty shoddy documentaries about these various topics that we cover with our podcast. But this is one of the exceptional, truly exceptional documentaries. It is truly a world class film, and I think again, like I said, that's the highest praise I can give it. Is that if every documentary out there that covers the topic of the paranormal or the unexplained or the unusual, high strangeness, whatever you want to call it, if they were all as thorough and as well executed as this documentary, I think the stigma would be a lot less than it currently is in the world today. So massive tip of the hat to Brett Eichenberger and the folks, Jill Remensnyder, and the folks that were producing and directing this documentary. Massive kudos to everybody that appeared in the documentary, all the eyewitnesses, and just the people that were subject matter experts. Just so well done. Thank you for taking the time to share your insight and your experiences with us. It's an awesome movie, and again, Raj, I cannot give, it's a 10 out of 10 for me. That's the best that I can say. So again, folks, if you like what you see here with the Soul Unexplained, hit that subscribe button down there somewhere. And that way you'll be notified every time Roger and I have new content. And coming up this Wednesday, we will have the episode 2 of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, where I'm doing these great little features. Season 5 of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch in 5 minutes or less, where I recap every episode this season, and Roger will be doing some as well, where we'll kind of be giving you the condensed version of everything that happens in every season, every episode of this current season of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. So again, folks, you can find us on Facebook. Just look for The Soul of the Unexplained. That's SOL, not SOUL or SOLE, but The Soul of the Unexplained, because, well, we're always shit out of luck, aren't we, Raj?
Sometimes it seems like that, but hey,
It
we're on
seems
the up.
that way. Certainly does. But thank you, folks, for watching. Thank you for checking us out. Thank you to all of our subscribers. Massive thanks to everybody that watched our most recent primer video for season 5 of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. It is, I don't know if the proper term to use is viral, Raj, but man, our views just, you know, increased exponentially from what they usually are. So if you're
Thank you.
one of the people that watched our video for the season 5 primer of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, where we welcomed our fellow insiders, Dennis Clark and John Nyberger, thank you for watching it. Thank you for sharing it if you shared it with your friends or your family. And we just we tip our hats to all of you. So thank you so much. That
Thank you.
about covers it, folks. We will see you next time. And Raj, I'll let you have the final word.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you again for watching this amazing episode. We hope you enjoy the documentary. Give us some feedback on what you like, what you didn't like. And as we always say, from the soul of the unexplained, see ya.
See ya.